Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and a managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. I actually thought of titling this video, I can't believe I'm still talking about TM30 after all this time. You know, when this first sort of cropped up on our radar here on this channel, this is actually going back, I think Big Joke was actually in charge of Thai immigration at the time. We did a number of videos though on TM30. It seemed like, I want to say the year 2017 going into 2018 was kind of the high watermark for discussion on TM30 insofar as, you know, it really became a point of contention. It sort of popped up. Again, I believe it was under Big Joke that it was sort of rediscovered in terms of a requirement, and then it was sort of reimposed as a requirement, and we've had to deal with it ever since. Now, it's always been on the book, the address reporting function on the books insofar as it's been part of the Immigration Act in 1979, since 1979, but it sort of fell by the wayside. I can say from personal experience, before I became Thai, I didn't really have to deal with it. And I kind of actually remember I was finishing up naturalization right around the time this was starting to become an issue. And looking back on it, I don't know, I expect I probably did at some point fill out the TM30 form, and my address really never changed in Thailand, but you know, I can't seem to remember from personal experience it being that big of a deal. That said, following about 2017, going into 2018, it did become a major concern, especially amongst expats in Thailand. And aside from issues pertaining to tax or other things like 90-day reporting, I think I can say with some degree of certainty that amongst expats, TM30 is something that makes everybody groan when it's time to talk about it. That said, I thought of making this video mostly as kind of a refresher. We've talked about this before, but I thought of making this video after reading a recent article from the Pattaya Mail, that's pattayamail.com. Article is titled 90-Day Visa Exemptions for Brits and Others Would Reduce Queues at Thai Immigration Offices. As per usual, I would recommend that those checking out this video, go check out that article in detail. A lot of good information there. That said, quoting directly, tourists are required to report their address to Thai immigration each time they enter the country via the notorious address form TM30. Yeah, now as we discussed in the past, the TM6 arrival cards effectively did this. And in a sense, for tourists especially, where TM30 even becomes relevant in a practical manner, it's as a result of the fact that they got rid of the TM6 arrival card, wherein one usually wrote down what address they were going to stay at. Well, now TM30 is sort of picking up that slack as we've gone to a digital interface at immigration checkpoints when you're coming into Thailand. And that digital interface caused TM30 or TM6 to be phased out, which then we had this kind of year and a half, arguably, of bliss where we didn't really have to worry about this kind of hypersensitive or hyper accountable, if you will, address reporting. But now, yeah, effectively, if you need anything done here in Thailand with regard to immigration, you got to go ahead and deal with TM30, as we've discussed in other videos. That said, quoting further, if they fail to do this promptly and require any service at immigration, such as extending their visa or requesting a certificate of residency to buy or sell a car or open a bank account, they will be fined, even though the technical responsibility rests with the hotel or condominium resident's quote-unquote housemaster. Some establishments report all their guests online to immigration, but many do not, or even fail to inform their guests. Yeah, okay. The analysis I did want to get into, though, was this. They will be fined even though the technical responsibility rests with the hotel or condominium resident's quote-unquote housemaster. Going back a while, and I'll try to dig out the links and put them in the description below, we did a pretty thorough analysis on this, and at the end of the day, the term housemaster is very, very nebulous. That was the conclusion we drew when we did the analysis on this. It was years ago, actually. No, it is not necessarily the technical responsibility of the owner of a given residence, because at the moment you begin to rent it, there's an argument that you are the housemaster of that premises at that point. And as we've discussed in other videos, Thai leasehold rules stipulate that, okay, yes, if you have a long-term lease of more than 3 years, it needs to be in writing in order for it to be enforceable. But if it's less than 3 years, it doesn't necessarily need to be in writing in order for it to be enforceable, or I should say it doesn't necessarily need to be registered in order for it to be enforceable. Either way, yeah, if you take up a residence in a guest house or somebody else's condo, so-called Airbnb, these sort of room sharing apps, whatever, if you have an agreement with that landlord, I think that makes you the housemaster at that point. Again, this isn't real cut and dried. It's very, very nebulous, this term housemaster. But long story short, as we've discussed previously, I think there's a strong argument to be made that the moment you begin taking up residence, if you will, the moment, again, residence in sort of the vernacular and sort of the colloquial meaning of the term, not sort of lawful permanent residence or tax residence or something like this, but basically you begin living in a place and you're renting it from the landlord, well, at that moment, you're the master for the term of the duration of that lease, whatever that rental agreement may stipulate. So again, there is a great deal of opacity associated with who actually has to file a TM30, especially with regard to sort of a one-to-one rental agreement between two parties. I'm renting somebody's condo for a month or something like this, or someone's villa for a month. Is that person the housemaster during that month? I think there's an argument to be made that they're not. More importantly, though, as a practical matter, it has no impact on the Thai, for example, a Thai landlord. A Thai landlord that owns, for example, a condo or a villa that's renting it to somebody, if they don't fill out TM30, it's really not any, it really doesn't affect them in any practical manner. Now, you could argue maybe they have to pay a fine, but again, then you get into the definition of housemaster, which is, okay, is that the landlord? Well, if they've rented it to somebody else, then in every way that counts during the duration of that lease, of that rental period, that person is the master of those premises. So you can argue that, I don't even think it's arguable. I think it's pretty sound to presume, okay, you're the housemaster for that duration. Again, it's not cut and dried. It's not fully clear. I'm not trying to make this to make pedantic points or semantic points about, you know, who's who and all this, and trying to narrowly define what a housemaster is as opposed to a landlord. Not the purpose of the video. What you need to understand as just somebody traveling to Thailand who's looking to stay here and you're looking to figure out responsibility with regard to TM30, as a practical matter, it really is you as the foreigner's responsibility, because again, the nebulous nature of this housemaster issue, coupled with the fact that as a practical matter, it's you that has to deal with the ramifications of failing to file TM30. The underlying landlord, if you will, is not necessarily going to see any ramifications from failing to file TM30.